Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order for, today is January 30th, 2017, for the joint City Council and Planning and Zoning workshop on CodeSMTX. Ms. Case, if you will please call the roll for City Council.
Yes, sir. Dr. Mahakanen. Is this on? Sorry. Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Ms. Houston. Here. Mr. Tomides. I'm
Here.
sorry, Mayor Tomides.
Here.
Mrs. Pruitt. Here. Mr. Gregson.
Here.
Ms. Derrick. Here. We have a quorum.
Okay, and now Planning and Zoning, please.
Jim Garber.
Here.
Angie Ramirez. Here. Travis Kelsey.
Here.
Sean DuPont.
Here.
Kate McCarty. Here. Betsy Gale Rand. Here. Lee Porterfield. We have quorum.
Okay, so council and commission, welcome. Thank you all very, very much for taking your time on another evening, and staff for getting everything together for us to move through this joint workshop for CodeSMTX. I'm just going to take 1 minute, and then I'm going to hand it over to Chairman Garber for a minute if he'd like to make a comment. But we have a lot of stuff on the agenda. It's, if you'll notice, if you've looked at the agenda, you'll see that it's by time. I'm going to do my best to try to keep us on those time schedules so that we are out very close to our ending time. We are starting just a few minutes late, so please take that into mind. I'll make sure we do get a break, and also if we can return back from the break on time as well. We did meet with staff and our facilitator earlier today. What would be the best way to go about and go through this and be able to? So there's going to be time for questions, but I think you'll find that the facilitator and staff have a kind of a unique way of trying to keep us moving along on the major topics that we need to really flesh out tonight, and that we need to really come to some kind of, or at least get everyone's input on, without getting too far down into the weeds. I do want to let the public know that this is not the only workshop that we have scheduled. There'll be another one, then there's, I believe, a planning commission hearing on this, and 2 more, at least, city council discussions or hearings as well. So there's going to be ample time and significant time for everybody to get deeper and deeper as more questions may arise. So with that, one thing about the microphones, your table microphone is pretty sensitive, this one, but you have to pass around this one so that you get on the television, or excuse me, on the video, because we are recording this in both video and audio. So if you want to speak, you've got to use this as well and kind of speak somewhere near. These are a lot more sensitive. Okay.
I'm good. You said it all.
Okay, Mr. Garber is good. Thank you, Chairman. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Abigail Giflin, who is going to kick us off. Is that correct? He's waived his 1 minute opening to keep us on schedule. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me see if this. Hello? No? This one doesn't go to the room. Good evening.
Good evening.
Abby Gilfillan, Planning Manager for the City of San Marcos. I will do my best to talk loudly until we get a mic with some new batteries. So, at any rate, we are here. This is our first in a series of workshops, as the mayor represented or talked about. This is we are now moving into the first meetings for the approval phase of CodeSMTX. So this has been a project that has been ongoing since 2000. We began in 2014. Since that time, over the last 2.5 years, we've worked with the public to produce a public draft code, which went out on May 27th. That draft code was truly a draft. It was intended to be a draft because we wanted to get a lot of feedback, and we've known all along that the next draft that came out would reflect a whole lot of changes based on what we heard from the public. So The purpose of tonight's presentation is to go over and talk about what are some of those big issues that have really risen to the surface throughout this process, and to begin working now with the Planning Commission as well as the City Council to start really beginning to deliberate these topics as we progress through this process. So thank you, everybody, for being here. So this is our agenda today. I've got an opening presentation that I'm going to give now. We're talking about today, a lot of the topics that are on the agenda today are specifically related and came up, are related to existing neighborhoods. So what are the things that are really important? What have we heard from existing neighborhoods? What's changing in the code? What's going to change for existing neighborhoods based on the code? So that's what we're going to focus a lot of tonight's meeting on. I'm going to start off with an introductory presentation where I'm going to really talk about high level what's changing for existing neighborhoods and why. How did we get to where we are with these proposed strategies? The next meeting on February 8th, we're really going to talk about the environment. Environment and existing neighborhoods are two of the big high-level issues that we have talked about throughout this process. They're two of the most important things from CodeSMTX that we've been working on and working hard to solve some of the problems and issues that have come up in both of those areas. This has been our process throughout. We start off with what have we heard? We start off by listening. What is it that's important to people? So we have public meetings, we have surveys, we have open houses. We go out and talk to people where they are to find out what's the most important thing. And then we take that and we look at that. How do we apply that? How do we apply what we've heard, what the problems are that people are experiencing in their neighborhoods with the development codes? What are those problems? What does the comprehensive plan say? How does the vision and goals in the comprehensive plan, how can those be considered when we're looking at these problems and trying to apply them through development code types of solutions? And then also, what are best practices? What other communities have been going through some of these similar challenges, and how have they addressed it? How have they looked at it? And so we use those key considerations, the planning commission, the comprehensive plan, as well as best practices from other cities. And then we filter that into some proposed solutions. We take those proposed solutions, we put them out to the public, we get comment back, and we start over and change that. So this has been an iterative process throughout, and will continue to be so. So this is really how we came up with the solution. This is the storyline for existing neighborhoods. We started this project out, CodeSMTX, back in 2014 with the Code Rodeo. During the Code Rodeo, we said, look, don't worry, we're not going to change anything in existing neighborhoods. The code's going to look exactly the same. It's not going to change. We're only going to write code for these preferred development areas. Those are the areas that things should change. That's the only place we're going to write code. What we heard was, that doesn't work for us. We're experiencing real problems in our neighborhoods. We're experiencing real problems with incompatible development and incompatible growth, and we need to do something about that. We shouldn't be allowing this incompatible development and incompatible growth in existing neighborhoods. So we need to do something about that. So we went back, we worked with our think tank. We said, look, this is one of the big things that we heard, and it's something that we're going to need to address and is going to need to be part of CodeSMTX. We can't ignore what's going on in existing neighborhoods and focus on preferred development areas and make these great codes for those areas without paying attention to and dealing with what's going on in existing neighborhoods. So we went back and we talked with the think tank. We came to City Council and the Planning Commission and said, the direction that we want to go is to really go out and listen and talk to the neighborhood. So we started a neighborhood character workshop process. First, we went out and did a ton of outreach. We went to the concerts in the park. We went to schools. We went to different groups. We spent a lot of time letting people know, listen, we want to hear what's going on in neighborhoods. And we had a really great turnout at those neighborhood workshops. We did 6 all throughout the spring of 2015. We did 6 different workshops, and we heard a lot. I'm going to go in my next slide and talk a little bit about what we heard and the key takeaways from those neighborhood workshops. The next thing, and throughout the process, what we did from there is, like I said, this has been iterative. So we said, okay, here's what we heard. Here are some proposed solutions. We put those solutions out in public workshops. We had surveys. We all along asked the question, are we on the right track? Are we making, are we moving in the right direction? The biggest thing that we heard over and over is that not to provide a development code shouldn't even provide any opportunities for incompatible development in or adjacent to existing neighborhoods. That was the biggest thing. When we walked into neighborhood meetings, that's what we heard first. And a lot of times, it took a long time to get over hearing that, to get into, okay, we know you don't want that anymore, but what do you want? So a lot of times it took a while to get past there. And that's part of the strategy of what we're doing with CodeSMTX, is that we are trying to solve that problem first, is not providing any opportunity for incompatible development in existing or adjacent to existing neighborhoods. Once that problem, we start to move past that, then we start to talk about what do we want. One of the biggest things in San Marcos that we heard throughout the comprehensive plan process was to make San Marcos more walkable and bikeable. We've heard we want to support opportunities for home ownership within existing neighborhoods. We want to improve the maintenance of existing neighborhoods with small, incremental growth. We want housing choices that serve all residents. So those are the types of things we'd like to see out of our code and out of new development. And so that brings us to the strategies. How do we achieve that? I'm going to talk about 3 different main steps that we're taking to do the first thing, is to stop incompatible development in existing neighborhoods. The first thing that we're proposing is an amendment to the comprehensive plan, the preferred scenario map, which would designate existing neighborhoods. The first way that we can single out existing neighborhoods and say that there are different rules or different requirements in those areas is to geographically represent them on our preferred scenario map. So that's the first thing that we're proposing, and that's a really important step. The next thing that we're proposing is to establish an appropriate scale. So we want to look at existing neighborhoods now are made up of a lot of different types of places. They have MF24 zoning, we have general commercial zoning, we have heavy commercial zoning, we have all of that going on right now in our existing neighborhoods. They're not 100% single family, and nor will they be in the future. That's not something that we're anticipating, or wanting to see out of the comprehensive plan. But one thing that is important is that we have some limits on the scale of development. So 2 of the big things that we're proposing for maxing out the scale in existing neighborhoods is that no new development can be over 3 stories. Another thing is that we're switching one of those metrics. Right now, we measure the scale of development or the size of development based on dwelling units an acre. That's not going away, but we're also introducing a new metric, which is just the number of units. So now we're saying that nowhere in existing neighborhoods can you have a single lot that has more than 24 units on it. So that's a big change, to go from 24 dwelling units an acre to 24 units cap. Because one of the big things we heard is that it doesn't make sense to have 1,000 bedrooms for apartments within existing neighborhood areas. That's too big of a scale. But we can't limit that scale with a dwelling units per acre type of measurement, because if you have 20 acres, you can put a lot of units on it. So we need to start capping that scale with different metrics other than just using dwelling units an acre. So that's a big change that we're proposing in existing neighborhood areas. So those are 2 of them. We'll get into more and talk about more of that scale of neighborhoods. The other thing that we're regulating and changing is that in existing neighborhoods, we don't have a flexible apartment type building type. Instead, we've got more, we've got a cottage court type of apartments or multi-family type of development that has space in between, things like that, to be able to look and feel more like a neighborhood, like a traditional neighborhood. So those are the types of things that we're doing to limit scale. And then the next really big thing is that we as a community, through this process, are setting and establishing the basic rules for development. This community established set of standards cannot be changed. We can't deviate from that through a PDD within CodeSMTX. There's no opportunity for that. So we set these standards, these maximum caps, and those can't be deviated from. So that's another really important thing. So those are the top 3 things that we're doing to solve that problem number 1 that we heard over and over throughout this time that we've been working on CodeSMTX. And then here's the next piece, and this gets into a little bit more technical and talking about our zoning strategy. So how are we doing this in terms of zoning? We're not rezoning any property at all with CodeSMTX. Not in preferred development areas, not in existing neighborhoods. We're not proposing to rezone them. That means that whatever zoning district you have now, if you're a property owner, you keep after CodeSMTX is adopted. So if you are zoned MF24 and you're located in an existing neighborhood, you continue to develop under that zoning category and that zoning designation. If you're zoned duplex, the same thing. The thing that changes is that if somebody comes in and they want to do more or do something different than their existing zoning, when they come to ask, they don't get to ask for MF24, they don't get to ask for PDDs, they don't get to ask for those zoning districts anymore that we've determined are not compatible with existing developments. Now they ask for our new zoning districts that do have these caps and standards. So that's a really important piece. And that goes to, again, really what we heard from the neighborhoods through the neighborhood character study process is that, I think that what we heard is that neighborhoods want more time to understand what's in here and understand what these standards are, understand what the code is before we talk about rezoning or changing entitlements on any properties. So that's an overview of where we are with existing neighborhoods, how we got there, and that's the high level. The next step is we're gonna go through and talk about now, take it down a notch and talk a little bit more about what those standards are, so the 5 big topics that came up through this process. So with that, I'd like to introduce our facilitator, Diane Miller, and she's gonna tell you a little bit about how we're gonna walk through the agenda in each of these items.
Hi, I'm Diane Miller.
And Diane, I think you'll have to stand up here with
Yes.
this. And here's,
Fancy, I don't need that. So what we're gonna do tonight, we've got these 5 topics to work through. And we've got about, well, now a little less than 30 minutes each at the most to work through each topic. Each of the topics that we're gonna be reviewing, and you'll see them listed on the front of your agenda, we'll have a sheet that talks about what we heard, about the key considerations that the think tank and the staff looked at with regard to that topic, and then the proposed strategies on the backside. So for each of these 5 topics in your handout, you've got the necessary overview information. What we want to do, Abby's going to run through some slides that tells you about the topic to provide the context, to explain where this came from. And then about 5 or 10 minutes on that. And then what we're going to do is actually have you reflect on a key question so that we can understand the issues that are most important to you. So the question we're going to ask you is, what do you want to see the code do to address this topic? So you've got these sticky notes of different colors in front of you. While Abby's talking, you can make 1 comment per sticky and just write down your top thoughts about what do you think you'd like to see the code do to address this topic. An idea is to possibly start with a verb, like improve this, or refine that, or change this, that kind of thing. It'll help us kind of organize our thinking. I'll gather those from you, and we'll see what themes are emerging from all of you. So we'll identify kind of the big topics that emerged from you regarding that discussion item, and then we'll work through any additional comments that you all might have. So you might have additional ideas that get sparked from what you hear from your colleagues, so we'll capture those. So that's our process. My big job is to keep us on time and to move us through so that we are able to cover all of this information tonight. So I'll be playing that role as well. So 5 to 10 minute presentation from Abby. You reflect on what would you like to see the code do. I have the question written down. I'll post it up here. I capture that, we look for some themes, and we have some discussion, and we move on to the next topic. So that's our approach for tonight.
okay. Oh boy. Oops. All right, while Amanda starts this, the first topic that we're discussing tonight is development process. So staff didn't propose a whole lot of changes in the development process chapter. That's chapter 2 of the code. But some of the things that we did do is that we went through and we tried to simplify it. We wanted to make it more accessible to the public and developers. So we took really long paragraphs of text. We chopped them up, we simplified the language, and we chopped them up into bullet points, 1, 2, 3, 4 type of thing. We organized the chapter better so that you can get through it better. But we didn't make a lot of changes in that public draft when it went out. But this is what we heard. So we sent that public draft out with a lot of, like I said, a lot of what's already existing for our development process. And one of the big things that we heard was that folks wanted to enhance the notification. So that's legal notice and things like that that come along with zoning. They wanted some increased scrutiny on certain types of requests, like property owner requested text amendments to the code, comprehensive plan amendments, and zoning changes in neighborhoods, any waivers associated with economic development incentives. They asked for more time between notification and hearing in that legal notice process, and they also asked for to include neighborhood organizations like KONA right into the development process. So that's what we heard. We also heard about streamlining the development process, particularly in areas like preferred development areas and economic development areas on the preferred scenario map. Some of the key considerations, some of the things that are really important in a development process are, number one, predictability. In terms of predictability, what that means, if I'm in a neighborhood and I'm a resident, I have a big tract of empty land next to me, a predictable development process would mean that I have a pretty good idea of what's going to be developed and built there. I have a pretty good idea of that. And, you know, I would think that if I live in single-family detached dwellings, what goes next to me is something like single-family detached dwellings. It's similar or maybe one increment above, just a little bit more possibly, but it's pretty similar. That's a predictable development process for residents. A predictable development process for the development community is when I buy a piece of land, I can look at the codes, the regulations, and the comprehensive plan and know what I can build. And I don't have to figure it out myself and propose it. That's not a predictable development process for anybody. And that's some of what we've been seeing over the years in development as we've been growing so fast. And we haven't kept up. Our development standards, our zoning hasn't kept up with the growth because we've been growing so fast. So some of that predictability goes away, and that causes a lot of problems in a development process. So that's one of the things that we were really working on. Another big piece or key consideration in development process is transparency and access. We want to make sure that the information is getting out there in a timely manner and in several different formats so that people can be engaged. But one of the things that we recognize is that not all neighborhoods have equal representation, and therefore it is really important that our codes, our standards, our predictable development process doesn't mean that if I don't have people yelling and screaming, I won't get what I want out of the development process. We have the opportunity now with CodeSMTX to set those standards and for what's appropriate development. And so that's what we want to do, is do it through the code. So some of the two big proposed strategies are in terms of notifications. These are some of the things that we've added based on what we heard from the public. So we heard all of those things. It doesn't mean that we do exactly what we heard in terms of all of those things. Instead, what we proposed are that we could provide the information in a more timely manner on our website so that as cases come in, we have a new requirement that's called web notice. And so we can post as soon as an application comes in and it's complete, it can go up on our website. People can sign up to get notifications so that they can see early on in the process when something has been submitted. Because that's one of the big things that we heard. It's that we don't have enough time to react. So we don't have to wait for that legal notification time period that's set really by state law. We don't have to wait for that time period in order to let people know what's going on. We can use different mechanisms to do that in real time. So that's web notice. The other thing is that we are now proposing to require neighborhood meetings held by the developer and open to any individual or organization. People can sign up to be on a notification list so that if a neighborhood, a developer is holding a neighborhood presentation meeting, they get a notice of that. So it's open to anybody and all. So that's another proposal that we have to add to the process. And that would only be for those types of applications that have that higher level of scrutiny. These are common practices in other cities, and so that's where that comes from too. When we start to look at how do other cities make sure to get the word out, these are some common practices that we've proposed to add to our code. The other thing that we're doing is adding some more tools for analysis. So the intent, so one of the things that we've done is we've added, it was a lot of work and it took a lot of effort in the code, but I think it's really important thing is that we've added intent sections, not general, broad, high-level intent, but specific intent to each type of standard. So for example, something like a requirements for a certain amount of transparency. If somebody's going to ask for an alternative way to meet that standard, say they're a movie theater and they can't fit that much glass because it's a movie theater, so you don't want light coming in, right? So they can't meet that standard, but maybe they can put their marquee windows or some other stuff like that that meets the intent. So if you don't write the intent in there, what is the intent of having glass at the street level? The intent is to activate the street so you don't have these blank walls. So that's how we can write in intent of the standard and then the criteria that that standard is judged upon. So we've gone in and we've worked really hard to write specific intent and specific criteria for each of those types of standards. So that's an important part of the development process. And then the last thing is that we've provided a lot more guidance for where and when certain types of zoning districts should be allowed based on our comprehensive plan and those guiding principles. We want to provide a lot of criteria and a lot of guidance for those types of decisions. And so, Diane, I turn it over to you.
All right, so again, the idea was to just get the first round blush of comments about this. And the question was, what do you want to see the new code do to address this topic? The topic is development standards. So I saw some of you writing down your stickies, so what I'll do That's fine. Yeah, actually, if you can kind of organize these, I'm going to get them up on the board first. Organize
Repeat the question again, please.
Yeah, so the big question is what do you want to see the code do to address this topic? So it's very actionable.
That's huge.
I want to see it improve this,
Take care of your
change
neighborhood.
that.
As soon as somebody applies. Absolutely. Should totally do it. Yeah.
So what you're going to notice probably is people will probably captured your question. You know, some of the comments might be something similar to what you were thinking. So we'll organize those.
Council and commissioners, also, while we're waiting, if you have any questions as we move through this, please just motion to me and I will make sure you're recognized for the video and the audio on the, that we're recording it for. And we seem to be right on schedule, so we appreciate that as well.
So I'm going to start with some of the comments here. So we've got a comment about make intent easy to understand. Clearly define a path for the developers and the community to know expected outcomes. Add environmental violations to fines and penalties. We've got a topic here, expand notification radius to 400 feet. 500. A larger distance for notification, so those two are related. That we need more notice time, so this is reflecting the time. And a similar suggestion, increase published notice to 30 days. And again, another comment, more time for notification. We've got one more bucket here. We need when will the website be user-friendly? Make fines and penalties proportional to the cost for the city to fix the violation. And then our last topic area is include opt-in email notification for any citizen. Include CONA on the neighborhood presentation meeting. Define what developments get web notice and neighborhood meetings. So we've got a topic about who gets notified, the format or forum for the notification on web, that we need more time for the notice and some specific suggestions, the radius and the distance for notification. And then we've got some others that are more specific to particular attributes of the code, add environmental violations to fines and penalties, and then this issue about making the code intent clearly understood. So this one's on fines and penalties as well. So in reflecting on those questions, do any of you have any kind of reactions or thoughts or additional comments that I can certainly get up on the board here?
I think we've seen for a long time a need for increased.
And I think you need this.
I think we've heard a lot of people express, not only on planning and zoning and city council, but our citizens, that we'd like to see more notice area. So I think that's important. I actually put 500 feet on
Oh,
mine.
okay, you've got one about
Yeah.
this. Yep. Perfect. Okay, great.
I agree with Councilman. I think we also need, I agree with Councilman. I think we also need probably 400 feet for notification. Also extending the time from 15 days to 30 days as well.
Can you write that down? We've got,
Will you repeat what was said?
oh, folks didn't hear that. So the suggestion was to, well, we've got two. So expanding notification areas to at least 500 feet, increasing neighborhood meeting to allow for stakeholder input. And then the comment that 15 days to 30 days for notification.
Ms. Houston?
We need more definition to what the neighborhood meeting is, who's going to do that. There's not a time set, so that could be the day before the public hearing. And I agree with the others, and also with the posted notice, there's some issues, signs too small, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a one-page
You got it.
suggestion
Okay,
already.
great. So we've got a comment here, provide an answer as quick as possible if it will definitely be no or not allowed. So I'm not sure, I know the specifics around, what's being requested here.
If it's incompatible, the proposal is not going to be approved per the code, and there's no opportunity for a PDD or anything like that, then I think one thing I've always heard is it takes San Marcos forever to say no to us. And there's a lot of investments that are made when we probably already knew it wasn't going anywhere anyway. So I think that might be something that, understanding that everybody wants to say, well, let me take it to the commission and see what they say. I get that part, or let it go to council and see how they feel about it as well. But I just think that that's part of the transparency part and the predictability.
Another comment here, need neighborhood meeting defined, when, who presents?
Mr. Gregson?
Now, it would seem like that if we really get to very specific with our intent of what we're expecting to see in each one of these categories, over time, I would hope that a lot of the concerns that we've had from all the extended notification and time frame and adding to the process, not that it's not needed, would at least begin to be allayed by just knowing specifically in writing what we're willing to allow in each one of these categories, and what we as a community agree upon is acceptable within each one of these areas.
Mr. Garber?
When will the existing neighborhoods be defined on the map?
So existing neighborhoods, the amendment to the preferred scenario map is proposed to go with the adoption of CodeSMTX. So we would be also proposing to amend the preferred scenario map to indicate those existing neighborhoods. The reason it's important to do it all at the same time is that, you know, right now our current code responds to the current preferred scenario map. We are writing this code to respond to a new preferred scenario map that does recognize existing neighborhoods. So we'd be taking the proposed amendment through at the same time.
And what about, I know that some of these proposed zonings are proposed to go in corridors. What if a corridor is going along an existing neighborhood? Does that mean it can still go in the existing neighborhood because it's on a corridor?
So corridors are something that the corridors that we're talking about identifying and that will be identified on the preferred scenario map would be things like I-35, FM 110, any other kind of loops that go around the city. What we're really trying to get at with those corridors is identifying those sort of highways, and they do have a different type of development that would go along a highway type of place. So corridors would not include places that generally go through existing neighborhoods. Some places like Wonder World Drive, the extension of Wonder World Drive there, I do think that clips a few existing neighborhoods, but essentially that's all we're talking about when we're talking about corridors, or more of the highway throughways.
Ms. Pruitt?
So Abigail, why is it listed then under corridor on zoning regulations that neighborhood districts are preferred along corridors, if what you said is actually how you define corridors?
If a corridor, like if Wonder World Drive, for example, the extension of Wonder World goes through an existing neighborhood there are parts of it there that touch existing neighborhood areas. So in those areas, the preferred development would be that somebody would ask for a neighborhood district there as opposed to a character district or another higher intensity district, because they're responding to the neighborhood around.
So will you have multiple definitions for corridors then? Because what I just understood was corridors were like I-35, major thoroughfares and highways, but you just said that the corridors will also be running adjacent and through neighborhoods. So will you have different definitions? Because the way it's mapped out here, it says corridor period, and there are preferred neighborhood districts, character districts, and special districts within those corridors. Only thing that doesn't exist is conventional residential.
Yes, so corridors will be another, that is also proposed to go on the preferred scenario map, would be to include those corridors. Those corridors would be FM 110, I-35, and the extension of Wonder World, or any other loops that are proposed as part of the transportation master plan. So one of the reasons that are major transportation loops. So that's one of the reasons that they're not quite on there yet, is I know that the council will be discussing the transportation master plan and some of those major highways and where there will be. So once those are identified and the locations of those are there, then we'll add those to the preferred scenario map as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
I'm still a little confused with all this.
Okay.
All this thing on it and listen.
Okay, thanks.
And then, Mr. Garber?
I know in the comp plan, the definition of corridors was a little bit different, and it included streets like Hopkins, Bishop, parts of Cecil, parts of North LBJ, parts of Holland. Are those under this new definition corridors or not?
No, sir.
Okay.
So we have created the neighborhood district 4M, which is a neighborhood district for Main Street. So that district is more for a neighborhood scale commercial type of development that would go along streets like that. So it's an actual zoning district. It won't be a corridor that's identified in any sort of way. And that zoning district isn't put on the ground. That's just what would be appropriate for somebody to ask for if they were on a more commercial corridor like Hopkins that's running, over here on 80, or in the more commercial areas, things like that. or Old Ranch Road 12 in some of the commercial areas. We have that district now that's most appropriate for that type of commercial development.
Let me do this. Let me check in with y'all.
Thanks.
So because we're on development process, and we've got 4 more topics to go. I just want to kind of make sure we don't lose anything or miss any big ideas on this topic. So I've got 2 more comment sheets here. 1 actually, see 2. I'll just read them off to y'all, and then we'll make sure we kind of got those big themes right out of this. Need more notice, not just legislative, include quasi